Hey everybody, it's Jason Lowe. You can call me J-Lo, the host of the AI Diatribe podcast. And today we are going to talk about something a little bit controversial. Basically, will AI take over the world? I don't know. We'll see. Joining me are my good friends Chad Muckenfuss and Jason Kaufman. Both are solution architects in the tech space, in the technology solutions distributorship space specifically, and former coworkers of mine. So, gentlemen, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so let's dive right into it. I think probably one of the most important things we can do, because this is something that's going to be watched by people that are a little bit technical, but also people that are not quite so technical. So we probably ought to just baseline what we're talking about when we say certain things, when we're referencing AI. So one of the things we talk about when we reference AI is artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And so let's set that as a baseline. You know what? Just yesterday, I heard a nice, interesting definition that Ilya Sutskever, have you guys ever heard of him? He's kind of one of the modern day, well, let's say one of the pioneers in artificial intelligence. He was one of the founders of OpenAI, and he is someone that everybody's watching very closely. Anyway, he was having a conversation, and he defined AGI as when you can teach a computer to do anything that a human can do.
So, quick question on that. Is he saying you still have to teach the computer to do it? Because I thought the whole mechanism of AGI is you don't have to really teach the computer. It can go learn it on its own.
Well, you have to teach it something, and it has to start at some particular point. But that would also include reasoning. You ought to be able to teach it to use reasoning and critical thinking, different types of things like that. Does that make sense? I mean, is he wrong?
I don't know if he's wrong. I think, again, touching on the training thing, I look at, its scale of information and training on the information. And then, the term before AGI, I think we used a lot was emergence. Like what is happening? What is it have the ability to think and reason and that type of thing, as well as have or replicate emotions too. And I think that's all kind of under that umbrella of AGI now. Do you guys think, do you agree with that?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think that's what everybody's expecting when we hit AGI, is that it's going to act like a human. It's going to have the same responses as a human, even though emotions are definitely something that it's not going to be able to feel in the true biological sense. It's probably going to have something in the way of reactions in that sense. I don't know. But the funny thing here is that it's also interesting to talk about where AI comes up short. Where does it come up short compared to what we are defining as AGI right now? And there are certain theories as to why it's come up short. Is it capacity based? Is it training based? Is it some sort of a problem with the large language model? Is it something wrong with neural network construction? What is it that causes AI to not hit that AGI level quite yet? And another fun thing that I think is probably good to point out is I heard a really cool analogy referenced the other day that really kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And this is how it goes. So let's say that we have something, A, and we have something else, B. You can teach AI and train AI all about A. You can teach it all of the things about A from top to bottom, left to right, soup to nuts, whatever, everything it can about A. You can do the same thing with B. You can teach it about B, and the two can be very, very similar. But this is where AI breaks down compared to human beings. If AI hasn't been told that A is similar to B, it cannot deduce that on its own. It can't intuit that on its own. It has to be told these have similarities. What do you guys think of that? Do you think that's true?
100%. I think that's the whole narrow part of it, is it can't infer that something is related to something else without explicitly being told it. And so 100% agree. I think that's our limitation right now, is the training capabilities on saying, hey, we're going to cross this area and get over to B, because it's referencing A and it's similar to it without actually explicitly mentioning that. That's where we're falling short.
I would agree.
And I think it comes down to how AI processes, in the token world, and how AI breaks all of that down and processes it. To Jason's point, there is no bridge if it's not explicitly told there's a bridge from A to B. It's not going to infer. It's not going to whatever. It's going to stop where it knows A ends and begin where B begins and goes that route.
Well, it's kind of because LLMs right now, everybody's saying, all right, LLMs are the closest thing we have to AGI, but LLMs by nature and the way that they're constructed, they run on heuristic rules. I mean, they run on like data points that it has and comparing what is asked versus the data points it has, and that's the limited scope that it has. It's doing pattern matching. It's not doing deductive reasoning. It doesn't have that true reasoning capabilities. It can simulate intelligence, but it doesn't have true, genuine understanding.
Are you combining the reasoning models with the language models when you mention LLM? Or are we still breaking down LLM and LRM?
Well, I think that's a fair question, and that's a fair point, Jason. And the question is, are the reasoning models really truly doing actual reasoning, or are they just doing a deeper, higher context, more data point comparison along the heuristic lines?
I I agree with that statement, as in they are only limited to by the data that they can officially use to kind of reason and QA what is being prompted or what is being generated. So I think honestly reasoning engines might be even limited by society and what we allow the language and reasoning models to be trained with. Because I mean everybody wants to protect their own data, obviously as valid concern, but we're also trying to contain it for safety reasons. I think that's limiting the capabilities of how it can train and reason itself. So to your point on, are they effective? I think we're at the very beginning stages here, and we hopefully will see more effectiveness in those types of reasoning models.
And you mentioned something that's really important, data protection and making sure that we're not exposing data that we shouldn't expose. But that also comes with a price to a certain extent. Like you say, there's training, but it also is a benefit, right? I mean, let's talk about this for a second. What are AIs trained on?
Now all the money's in synthetic data. I mean, they're making acquisitions of billions of dollars just for the synthetic data within these organizations.
And yet synthetic data has a root.
Yep.
What is the root that synthetic data is trained on? Human generated data. I mean, like it or not, one way or another, all of the data that these LLMs, all of these reasoning models even are being trained on basically come at the very root cause, something that originates from a human being. It's very little of it is unjaded, very little of it is unbiased. And this is part of the danger, right? Systems are going to reflect the data they're trained on. We also know that if the data reflects some sort of societal bias, the AI system is going to inadvertently perpetuate that. It's going to do that. And so could that have an effect on the way that AI is built, grows, does its thing? I think so. And then you also have the data privacy and security thing. Are we really giving it the right type of data? Are there foundational frontier models that are holding off on releasing or at least doing something with LLMs that are trained on some of that better data that's maybe a little bit more personalized, a little bit more intricate, a little bit more risky? Who knows?
I also think in addition to the data, processing all of that data that's out there, like, to Jason's point and to both Jason's points, I think we look at this and say, okay, there is a lot of data out there, and a majority of it that's public knowledge has already been learned off of or learned from, if we want to say that. So what's left is quote unquote private data of some sort, whether it's personal to me, whether it's personal to my organization, whether it's private, whatever it may be. That's kind of the last bastion that has yet to be touched from a learning perspective. I agree wholeheartedly that it's all human based and human driven, and the biases and everything else involved in a 16th century book that's been processed and trained off of is going to be way different than a modern day novel. So, looking at all of this that's been dumped into, I also think it comes down to compute power, that's going to be driving all of this in the future, and pulling information in real time from us as humans. Meaning that as we're emailing through our Gmail accounts, as we're doing all of these things that we've given up our freedom over, more or less, and offered up, to Gemini and to OpenAI, and running all these things through, from creating PowerPoints to generating emails to whatever, it's learning from that. It's learning about how Chad wants to write an email, how Chad, goes through his email and stuff he chooses to look at or just delete blindly and not look at, and all of that kind of thing, I think, continues to train these models, but it's at a much slower pace than the original boost of, hey, we've got all these volumes of books and everything else that's now all digitized. We can dump all of that in and see where it goes. Now I think it's almost in a parallel structure with humans ourselves, being that we are feeding it based on whatever we're utilizing that has an AI underlying component to it. And I think it's going to be a much slower from the initial jump. I think it's going to be a much slower process.
And Chad, I do have to say, I'm surprised you mentioned Chad and Google in the same sentence. I figured you were more of an AOL email person.
I am, but I try and keep that private. So thank you for sharing that, Jason.
Come on, dude. Hotmail all the way. Something to remember is that the propagation of synthetic data is because they were running out of data to train these models on. I mean, they had fed it basically the entire digital knowledge of the human race, and it was still asking for more. Why? Let's ask the question, why? Why are they trying to find more synthetic data? Because they're trying to make it more big and more powerful and get it closer to be able to do that deductive reasoning that it just simply cannot do. I mean, the LLM architecture, it's great, but can it do? I mean, it's like trying to take a yellow color and let's say that we want to make green. Oh, okay. So I'm going to add some red to that yellow. And no matter how much red I add to that yellow, it's never going to get to green because it's just the wrong color. It's the wrong method. It's the wrong thing to do. And so it's coming close, and it's coming closer as far as emulating human intelligence and emulating deductive reasoning, but it just simply is not able to do it. So there must be some sort of a leap from how LLMs currently work, how neural networks currently work, to something that is a little bit more akin to actually being able to reason.
But in order to do that, I feel like we have to significantly decrease the amount of pre-built training that goes into it. Like, I think AGI, the whole point of that is going to be, hey, we're instead of training it with hundreds of billions and trillions of tokens and, you know, all these different parameters, it's going to be, hey, we're giving it very minimal amount of data and logistics in order to go out and learn everything that it needs to do and infer based on multiple parameters, and it will take parameters from one area of focus and leverage it over here, but it doesn't have that stopgap that says, hey, we can't go from this bridge to this bridge. So I think AGI, the biggest change that's going to be is, hey, we don't need to train on all these different data points. It's going to go do its thing and figure it out.
Yeah, there you go. Well, what do the experts say as far as how close we are to AGI? Okay, Dario Amodei. Everybody knows Dario Amodei. Amodei. I can't remember. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
We'll go Dario.
Amodei. We'll go with Dario. Dario.
We're first name basis with him now too.
Yeah, no kidding. So just in the last month, he's been interviewed, and he says that he thinks that we're going to hit the AGI level by the end of 2026. Now, he's being a little aggressive. We all know this. Okay. Ilya Sutskever, he won't predict. He does say that AI is definitely surpassing his expectations from the past, but he's not predicting a particular time frame that he thinks that we're going to hit AGI. But Demis Hassabis, I don't know if you guys know Demis Hassabis, he's with Google DeepMind, and he's one of the bigwigs over there. He says 5 to 10 years. So it's usually somewhere between there, right? Oh, we're going to hit it within the next 12 to 24 months. Oh, it's still 5 to 10 years away. But regardless, the furthest we're looking out, 5 to 10 years. Even the most conservative people are saying that.
I find it interesting because I think, again, going back to the point of it's learning now in real time as we're utilizing it. I think there is, I mean, if we look at adoption, and all three of us have spoken to this in public forums, if you look at the adoption of technology and how it was adopted over time between the internet, cell phones, and now AI, I mean, it's that hockey stick effect that we've all referenced. But I'm talking to my children who are 17 and 14, who are using ChatGPT and Claude every day, and they're being taught to use it at school. So what's changing is that there's an AI first mindset, meaning that they're going to AI. They're not necessarily going to a Google search like we all do. I understand Google and Gemini and that type of thing, but it's this AI mindset first, like, hey, let's throw it into ChatGPT, let's throw it into Claude and see what comes back, and then maybe reference it if there's a hallucination or if there's something else going on that doesn't look quite right. But having that adoption rate and having a generation of kids moving to adults through college and then into the workforce, like that, in my mind, over the next, and that fits in that 5-year timeline, I mean, that's a huge uptick in adopting it, leveraging it, using it as a daily tool. And if we look at, you and I were talking, but if we look at Ali Miller, who's one of the big renowned players between AI and business, she uses it. She says, 40 plus times a day, she's using a GPT of some sort, whether it's chat, whether it's Claude, whether it's, one of the others, in how can she do business better? How can she do her job better? It's not just these mundane tasks, it's creativity, it's all these other things. And going back to the point here is it's all learning from that. So every prompt we do, everything that's put into it, it's learning. And the better we get at prompting, the better the results get, the more specific the results get, and the better that AI is learning from that and connecting that A to B and building that bridge instead of just stopping at A only. I mean, that's how I see this, growing and moving.
And
Well, you know what's interesting is that there is a 52% statistic that 52% of Americans are more concerned than excited about AI's role in daily life. To your point, Chad, that has a major age demographic shift between the two sides, because the older someone is, the more likely they are to appear on the side where they are more concerned, whereas the younger they are, they're going to have a better chance of being more excited about AI in their daily life. Jason, I didn't mean to step on you. What were you going to say?
no worries. Yeah, just piggybacking on what Chad was saying, because the evolution of what we're seeing with the whole narrow models is previously it was a single monolithic narrow model, one big LLM controlling everything from the prompt to all the compute in the middle to the response. But now, they're advancing the chain of thought methodology to where they're breaking up that main monolithic LLM into sub agents underneath it, and we're seeing multiple agents running simultaneously in order to hit different objectives and bring that all back. Where are we touching on kind of the idea of AGI? We're starting to get to that point where it can be, multi-threaded and multiple simultaneous actions can blend across multiple different areas, but technically underneath the hood, it is one single thing doing one single task. It just does it really well, and then it has something that aggregates that all together. It's just like the human brain saying, hey, go grab that piece of food. First, I'm going to use my sniff test. I'm going to tell, hey, the baby back ribs are over there 5 miles away. And then I'm going to use my hands to go touch it, and using all those different sensory feelings to come back and infer something on, hey, the baby back ribs are over here. I'm going to go grab them. Sorry, it's lunchtime and I need to go eat. But the point is AGI, I think the idea coming back to minimum training to do multiple different things with one main application, I agree we're still about 5 years out of that ideology. But I think the difference is, and I think Ilya is going to respond well to this one, is once we hit AGI and have something that can move so much faster than us, that could take so much amount of data, that can go learn it real time, but it's doing it in multiple simultaneous ways, much quicker than a human can process, I think we're going to see a quicker jump from AGI to ASI, the super intelligence piece of it, because once you let that thing run, it's going to sprint and it's not going to stop. And that's the one thing that we are limiting AI from a human perspective. We won't have that once we hit AGI. So I think I hit multiple points there, but I think the idea is we're probably 4 to 5 years out of true AGI, but I think we're going to expand on the COT methodology to see how effective we can make ANI work for us in today's world.
So just so everybody knows, those that don't know the COT analogy, COT stands for chain of thought. And so that's what Jason is referring to. And you raise a really, really good point. In human beings, right, the frontal lobe does decision making, it does problem solving, it does planning. The temporal lobe does auditory information. It helps you understand language. The occipital lobe does the visual stuff, and the parietal lobe does all of the spatial organization and sensory information. We're talking about a multi-node brain. To us, it's one human brain, but in actuality, it evolved from different segments of brain capacity doing different things and all cohesively working together to form one specific collective. Will multi-agent systems, or MAS, are those going to head in the same direction? Is that what's really going to make something happen, at least as far as AGI? Quite possibly. I mean, we know that specialization is good, right? From a purely economic standpoint, two people just doing everything themselves are not going to be as efficient as one person specializing in one thing and the other person specializing in another thing. They become faster, they become better, they become more skilled, and they're able to complement each other. And so that's the principles of economics, at least as far as specialization and trade is concerned. Very applicable to intelligence. If we're talking about AGI, if it's going to reach that level, is going to have to approximate the function of the human brain. There's going to have to be different agents or different systems underneath all working together to get there. Can it get there? Can it get to the place right now, architecturally and structurally, the way AI is right now? Can it lead to behaviors resembling human cognition? Who knows? Who knows?
I think we're really going to have to expand on the reasoning part of those models in order to get there, because I think reasoning will lead to, the emotional side of it, to where what can we program it to validate and check itself before it does a specific action or a response. And I think that's on the reasoning side of the engine, not the generative side.
You're absolutely right. Okay, let's get a little bit more into the risks and maybe some of the ethical considerations here. So we already talked about bias. We already talked about discrimination. We've talked a little bit about data privacy and security, kind of how important that is. I want to raise a little thing and I want to get your thoughts on this. So I am guilty of always trying to take AI and talk about it analogously with things in the real world. And so when we talk about data privacy stuff, I find it interesting to compare this to the doctor-patient privilege analogy, specifically because you're talking about skilled white-collar intelligence workers, right? We all need specialists. I don't know if we need a doctor for medical things. I don't know if we need a therapist to help us with mental health issues, lawyers that are going to help us with legal stuff, accountants that are going to help us with our finance stuff. Every one of those occupations, you're dealing with private information that you don't necessarily want to get out. If I'm talking to a lawyer and I'm admitting guilt to my lawyer, but he's still going to work to try and get me off of the charge, okay, great. If I'm talking to my accountant and I'm having him recook the books a certain way so that I can avoid certain tax things, not that I'm doing that, IRS, back off. But, this is the type of stuff that makes these intelligence workers most effective, is that we're giving them inside information. We're giving them insight that allows them to do their job more effectively. So now we can relate that to artificial intelligence in saying that is PII, or personally identifiable information, is this sensitive information going to be necessary for AI to truly help us in the best ways that it possibly can? And if so, what are the risks to that?
Well, I think the risks are huge to that. I think we, especially as American citizens, are very, very, very sensitive to the privacy aspect of not only our lives, but especially finance and how we handle our own economics internally in our families and our lives and all of that. And then next would probably be medical history and all of that type of thing. I think, I look at it from a standpoint of working on a few opportunities that have dealt in and around leveraging AI in the medical space and removing patient identifying information from x-rays and that type of thing, imaging, and just leveraging the imaging itself to work on determining factors of whether or not something is cancer, and going through tens of millions of images and x-rays and CAT scans and MRIs and all that kind of stuff, and just looking for specific things and comparing and contrasting all of those different images. I think it can be leveraged there much easier than it can, to your point, of a CPA doing my personal taxes and saying, hey, you know what, we need to, fudge these numbers so I can get this amount back, or so I don't have to pay this amount. You put in A, it's going to come back with a result based on A's input. To Jason's point, and in the prior part of the conversation here, we're looking for put in an A and A plus, but not B, and then come out with a completely different answer. And I don't think it has the ability to do that without accessing, I think, Jason, to J-Lo, to your point, without having all of that context. I don't think we're going to get there easily anyway.
I think it needs to know what to do with that type of data, to exactly what you were saying. But I think if we move the P out of it, the personal aspect of it, like you could still use somebody, just a random identifier of a name, a phone number, an address, an email address, or even health records, blood type. You could use all that stuff to build a reputable database that can be used to infer specific things based on certain attributes. Like Chad and I, we've worked on multiple companies now that worked with multiple companies now that are like building applications around this type of data, to where you're using like family history, you're using certain attributes, you're using many different things that would fall under PHI, but they're still tokenizing it and masking it to where you can't actually see the identifiable information on the front end from somebody, but it still could point it back to you on the back end to say, hey, based on these parameters and your family history, this is something you need to watch out for, and being proactive with your healthcare. So there's a lot of safeguards we need to do when it comes to the personal information and the identifiable stuff. But using the data is super important to leverage these models that can infer and create all these things that could be more proactive rather than reactive.
But is it really possible that companies are going to allow the creation of these totally anonymized data sets? Now, listen, just hear me out. Companies are here to make a profit. How are they going to make a profit off of an individual? They're going to get to know that person so good that they can advertise through them and target them specifically for different things. So, from a corporate perspective, a pure profit perspective, anonymizing data, while in some cases potentially beneficial, in other cases, they're still going to want access to that personally identifiable information. They're all going to say, yeah, we're going to fully anonymize and we're going to tokenize all of this stuff and we're going to use it in general for the good of mankind. Oh, but over here we have a private little copy behind locked doors where everything is already identified. I don't personally believe that a truly anonymized data set out there exists unless you're doing it in a hybrid scenario. I mean, we're talking about scenarios now where we're dealing with cloud-based foundational models. We're feeding this stuff into the cloud. We're feeding this stuff to models that are using this data in ways that we don't know. We're telling it stuff. They're saying it's anonymized. They're saying it's not being remembered. We don't know that for certain. The terms and conditions don't reflect that. But what you can do is you can create a local model that you have control of, whether that be, I don't know, Gemma, whether that be Llama, whether that be Mistral, whether that be DeepSeek, who knows? You can get these local models and only expose data to it that you want to, and then you have control of the model, so any further learning or training that it does is not going to get out there in the general worldwide webbing. It's not going to be used for companies in a bad way. And so this hybrid model is pretty good. I see an LLM being a traffic cop, right? Does this prompt require some sort of personal information? Yes. Okay, let's use the local model. Is it something that's a little bit more generalized as far as knowledge need is concerned? Let's go to the foundational model. But this also leads to another question. How is cybersecurity going to come into play here, Jason? And thinking about this specifically, now we're not only safeguarding the data itself, we're safeguarding the LLM, because now we're talking about if someone gets in and gets a copy of that LLM that's been trained a certain way, has been exposed to data in a certain way, remembers things a certain way, that's the equivalent of kidnapping someone, right? So now we have to be a little bit more careful cybersecurity-wise. Jason, the risk has gone up. This is a big risk, right?
It's a massive risk because once that LLM has been trained on the data and it has access to it one single time, now it's referenceable through the entire engine itself. That's the whole problem with releasing these foundational models to any company or any person whatsoever. If they enter the wrong stuff in there, congratulations, now it's fairly public and somebody else can reference it in a prompt. So a lot of it comes down to ideas. You know, if you're looking at like the Cloud Security Alliance, you're looking at ISE Squared, you're looking at, you know, all these ISACA, all these different companies that are trying to define how to protect AI. It sounds like a lot of them are kind of coming back to what the difference between the knowledge and the operational side of it. So having the central point LLM trained with that synthetic data so it knows how to leverage that data, but then the actual identifiable stuff is controlled by the user themselves. Like if you study a lot of blockchain technology, you studied like quantum computing, you studied all these different things, the idea is holistically give the user or the person themselves control biometrically over their own data, but then train all these other things in order how to reference it and how to utilize it, but then you're giving access to the actual real data in order to find a value for yourself type of thing. But everything else is kind of masked, so it's anonymized, but it can still be used to train and, you know, allow these systems to be effective. Cybersecurity itself, there's still a lot of learning in order to get in front of how capable these models are. They're just getting too capable too fast before policies and procedures could be created upon them. But the idea is play it safe first. Don't train any models whatsoever or input any data that's confidential, identifiable, or any of that stuff, just as a safeguard. But there's a point of enablement.
There's a really interesting point that you raised there, which is the incorporation of blockchain technology, at least as far as maintaining security of information. That's definitely something that maybe we could talk about in a future conversation. Look, do
you want me to do a quick hit point? Sorry to interrupt you.
I don't know. Let's not. Let's hold off on that. Let's save that for a future session. I think that's actually a pretty good conversation for us to do in the future. But we need to bring this back around full circle, right? We started this thing by asking, is AI going to take over the world? Now, the question is, what does AI taking over the world look like? Is that like Hollywood dystopian take over the world, like Skynet, Ultron, these different types of things? Or are we talking about something a little bit more interstellar, where we have these AI entities that can certainly work for the good of mankind? It's interesting that popular media has had such a massive effect on how people look at AI, right? A massive effect. 41% of Americans now, because of suspicion of AI, 41% is the perception that Americans believe are accurate online content and actually human generated. Okay, so Americans are now thinking that only 2/5 of the content out there is actually generated by human beings. And that's going down, and that's trending down very drastically. 78% of Americans are saying they're finding it harder to distinguish real from artificial content. So is AI taking over the world of communication? Possibly. Now let's take another look. Let's take a little bit more dystopian look. What do the experts say? I think it's really interesting that Elon Musk, who everybody respects, love him or hate him for whatever he's doing with Doge and all these other different things, the guy is smart. We all acknowledge that the guy is smart. He's done a lot of really crazy and great things, and he's built some pretty impressive companies that do a lot of really fun things. He estimates there is a 10 to 20% chance that AI could pose existential threats to humanity. Jeffrey Hinton, by the way, who is the professor that Ilya Sutskever took his class, and they started collaborating and then ended up launching OpenAI because of some of the stuff that they came up together with. Jeffrey Hinton is considered the godfather of AI. Ilya was a student of his. He has said that he thinks there's a 10 to 20% chance that AI will lead to human extinction within the next 30 years. So now, I give it to you. Tell me your honest gut feeling, guys. And Chad, we can start with you. Will AI take over the world?
I think the short answer is yes. I, again, kind of look to that 5 to 10 year time frame for when it is kind of the controlling factor in what we as humans do on a day-to-day basis. I look at it right now as a little bit more benevolent, in the sense of like a Jarvis in that aspect of things. Like, it's a helpful tool, it's something that whatever. But I think after everything that we've talked about and explained today, once some of these bridges and some of these gaps are filled within how does it get from A to B and not just stop at A, I think then we're in for some interesting changes. We've already had some AI go off the rails with Facebook, and people have heard about all that stuff where they've shut it down. The famous video that's going around now is that it's 2 AI chatbots that decide, hey, you know what? We don't need to communicate in English anymore. We're 2 chatbots, and they communicate in their own language that we don't even know what they're saying or doing or anything like that. So is there a dystopian future? Sure, there can be. Is there a chance that we can put some guardrails on it and control that outlook? Hopefully. I like to be optimistic on that, but it's the world changing, and it will definitely change some major aspects of the human race and global politics and global commerce and all of that. It will continue to shrink the world down and make it much smaller, and I hope that we can come to some ethical and some good outcomes in the very near future here.
For sure. Jason.
So I'm going to try to answer your question with another question. I'll go into details. So how do you contain something that is far faster and smarter than you? So as we start getting the AGI and ASI, these systems are going to be far superior than anything we could even imagine or comprehend. So how are we going to put guardrails around it? Really, any movie that, like, Hollywood, it's Hollywood, make believe and all that stuff. But if you're talking through Terminator, iRobot, what are some of the other ones that have the AI as the core functionality? If something went wrong, it was because it was created. What was it?
Eagle Eye. Minority.
Eagle Eye. Yeah.
Minority Report's a good one.
Yeah, Minority Report's a good one too. Think of like everything that they brought up is a valid concern on where, like, even iRobot, for instance, it has the main 3 laws on protecting humans. But as it got smarter and kept training itself and learning, decided for itself what its new definitions are of those 3 laws. But they're all around the core concept of protecting humans. And it decided in order to protect humans, it was allowed to sacrifice other humans that it saw as a threat to protecting the main core human.
But Jason, isn't there a little bit of a I mean, you're using Hollywood sensationalism to make a point. So
Yeah.
can you make the point without the Hollywood sensationalism?
Yeah, I'll make the
That's
point.
the question.
So the point is, I think in the next sense, until we get to full AGI and ASI, it's gonna be easy to control, because you have to map dependencies, you have to enable it from a human perspective. But once we hit AGI and allow it to scale, I think it's gonna be far surpassing anything that we can really control, where it has to be sympathetic to humans and understand that there is a teaming relationship here, or else it could get bad.
You know what's interesting is you guys have seen the movie She, right? Have you watched that with Joaquin Phoenix and the relationship that he has? And this movie is rather interesting because it deals with the progression of AI getting too fast, too powerful, too big. And then the AI collectively go off together and do something and leave the human race behind. But it doesn't deal with where did they go? What did they do? Are they still interacting with humanity in a certain sense? I'm with you both. I think we're in a situation where we just simply don't know, and we cannot know. We can certainly try and teach AI some sort of a set of like principles and ethics or something. That's pretty important. But that is based upon planting a flag in what is good. So who determines what is good? And if we're telling it to try and get away from bias, any type of a flag that we plant as far as this is good, the AI is going to be able to look at that and say, but is that a reflection of some sort of bias by the person that's defining this for me? And so it may come up with its own set of values and ethics. And to your point, what is that going to entail as far as the cost of human life, how humans compare to each other, what determination is this human more valuable than this human, what determines whether this human gets more resources or less, more help or less? It's going to be a little bit of a Wild West. Nobody can really tell. Is it going to have some sort of a harmful effect on humanity? Possibly. Is it going to be a little bit more altruistic, like Chad's perception? I sure hope so. Boy, I guess in this case, you can call yourself a hopeful agnostic, just the same way with AI as you can with some sort of a belief in deity. You're not sure. You're not sure if it's going to head one way or another, but you're certainly hopeful that it's going to go in the right direction. I don't know. Interesting stuff. All right, I think that we have talked about this for long enough. We certainly have brought up some really, really good points. I love talking to you guys because you know your stuff, and I love the way your brains work. So thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to future sessions together. But to those of you that have listened this long and made it this far, thank you so much. Really appreciate you hearing our thoughts. If you'd like, please make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, whatever the heck it is on whatever medium it is that you're listening to or watching this on, because we're going to be having many of these roundtable discussions moving forward, and they're going to be quite lively, I think. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic journey into the world of AI, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
And okay, I'll stop recording.